Hello, Dave. First of all, thanks to everyone who's decided to tune in, including people I know in the military that are watching this. And Dave, for those who don't know, Dave Ellis does a lot of work with UK Column. He's a strategist. He knows every single high-ranking military officer we have in our armed forces in the UK. And not only that, he also has a very good insight to things that's happening in the Lords, in the Cabinet Office, and with politicians. So, Dave, thanks for coming on and having a chat about this, because it is concerning.
It's very concerning. Just as a matter of housekeeping, I haven't had anything to do with the UK column for a number of years now, since sort of them disengaging, really. So I don't know really as to why that happened, but Mr. Gerrish did have some very interesting things to say on my couch at one stage, and then they seemed to go off in a very different direction, and I've got to say it was entirely unsatisfactory from my point of view. But just so people are under no misillusion, you will not find me there. I don't have anything to do with them anymore.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Trevor, for hosting this. I've got to say it's a bit like sort of the court report, a bit like David Frost. We're going to be up that level of the strategic level, I hope, with this.
Well, Dave, do you know what? You speak to me, I think probably about 4 or 5 times a week. We discuss things, and you're very well informed when it comes to the UK's defence and what we have to offer. But I'm not going to talk about Ukraine and Russia at the minute. But the one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed, and hopefully everyone else has noticed, is that at the minute in the United Kingdom, there are so many things going on to distract us. I mean, we currently have, for instance, I'll get this out of the way, Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we have that out the way. We have a migrant crisis at Dover and what's happening in the hotels around the United Kingdom. We have an NHS on strike, teachers wanting to strike. We have the Harry and Meghan bollocks. We've got so much going on now that our media is filled on our media, and we are all looking that direction. But behind closed doors, senior officials in the Cabinet Office and civil servants are slowly but surely signing away the control of our armed forces to the European Union defence. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been going on for quite some time. So there's the mechanics of it and the detail are really started with the vote to leave. So you're quite correct. The sort of the start point for this is Tony Blair. All right. So he was given a bundle of paperwork from John Major, who took us into Maastricht and so on and so forth. So we've got Margaret Thatcher saying no to Defence Union in 1984. It's a long-standing objective of the EU. Anybody that's under a misillusion that it was a trading bloc and a single market, no, it was always much more than that. It always wanted its own military, i.e. to unify the European nations. So it's been going on for a long while. Maggie said no. Major said yes, but didn't do anything. Tony Blair did it and expedited it and hid it in plain view. That's the key thing. So there was no vote, no discussion. It was just done and hidden in plain view. Now, bringing it up to date to where we are now today with the NATO agreement to the EU, obviously what we've seen is a slice at a time since Blair took us in 2000. We've seen the transfer of government from the Tory to Labour, no difference, 2 cheeks of the same backside, really, frankly, with their policy. A undertaking from the Tories to carry on with this in silence, which is how Blair had set it. It was done in apolitical silence. And the reason for that is if it's apolitical and it's not on the agenda, no MP talks about it, investigates it. It's not a political issue. So the mandate really is what we're seeing now is there's no mandate not to.
Yeah.
Because there is no campaign, there is no public awareness as to what's happening at the big end of our strategic position, policy-wise, in defence.
Yeah.
So if we start from the government's mantra that they've always trotted out with this is NATO is the cornerstone of the UK defence policy. All right.
Yep.
Now, So NATO has just unified with the EU.
Yeah, I've seen that, read that.
Now they've done it so obviously, as you're correct, whilst all these other things are going on, the big strategic position of the EU becoming militarized has been done in apolitical silence. It was excluded from the vote leave agenda. And a lot of the people that were involved with that were involved with the dovetailing at the 1922 backbench Tory Defence Committee.
Yep.
Could name them all, but they know who they are, and the officers know who they are as well. So what we've got, I mean, Boris is an interesting one because when we jump forward to the GE in 2019, and Anne Widdecombe called him out.
Yep.
She said Boris is not committing to opt in. That what Boris was doing was continuing this silence in this huge geopolitical and defence policy issue. So it was absolutely in silence. You know, if you vox pop the majority of the general public, obviously me and you have been talking about it for years, but the general public have no understanding. So, you know, do you remember the big bus with Boris and everybody making talk about the money for the NHS?
Yep.
Well, actually, there was an even bigger issue, which was completely concealed, which was the defence and security, which was certainly over 50% of the EU's deal. So Boris has got a lot to answer for because he wouldn't commit. What he did is he kept quiet. So we're back to the silence.
Well, the one thing that I've noticed, and we tried to bring this up before, David, in a discussion, and I had issues with social media platform getting the video out. But what people aren't aware of is in October, the UK, without telling everyone, but the Cabinet Office and those in the civil servants, senior civil servants, there were stories leaked to the media saying that the UK was moving closer to the EU military mobility scheme. Now, that was in October. But what we didn't know, which came as a bit of a shock to a lot of people, was in November, without even a vote in the House of Commons, the UK joined the EU military mobility project. We signed up to that, which means, and the one thing which I find strange is the amount of tactical knowledge and the amount of military officers we have that are qualified in operations aren't being used to even speak about this. In fact, the person in charge of the European Union defence is a Finnish Lieutenant General. Lieutenant, is it Esa Pulkkinen? He's in charge, and his number two is an Italian guy. So with the amount of knowledge and tactical acumen that we actually have, and the fact that the UK is the biggest contributor to the European Union defence, and without us, they would go completely bust. Now, before I move on, the one thing that I've noticed from, take away the military background of mine and look at this just from an outsider. Our politicians and our celebrities are talking about Brexit. We haven't moved forward. We haven't moved forward. Right. Now, the problem why we haven't moved forward with Brexit is because we have dozens, if not over 100 people in the House of Lords and politicians that have not wanted us to move outside Brexit. They have held the British public. They've held industries. They've held farming. They've held everything. They're holding the British people to ransom like hostages. And the EU are holding us to ransom only so they can get our money and get us back into the EU. If our politicians and those in the Lords were 100% behind Britain moving forward, there would be hardly any of these situations where we are struggling.
That's right. I mean, across the spectrum, I mean, you can't really refer to what we've got as a government. It's just a series of open goals.
Yeah.
You know, it's an open goal for, you know, illegal immigration. It's an open goal for all this other stuff. And, you know, if we wanted to cite the bill that's going through that's supposed to protect our veterans from being legally pursued, another open goal.
Yeah.
Right? So you're quite right to highlight the sort of the very apolitical nature of this. And I think Jacob Rees-Mogg has called this out time and time again about parliamentary competence. What competence does Parliament have over these issues? So as a direct sort of, let's call the elephant in the room out. there's been absolutely no, and we've seen a slice at a time, this EU ratcheting effect, as Mike Hookham calls it, the former UKIP MEP and now member of the Alliance for Freedom and Democracy Party, that this ratcheting in. So we've seen a couple of big slices last year, which was going into PESCO, military mobility. Prior to that, we had, and it was me that pushed it to Nigel Farage, was the bridging unit forming up with the Germans, where they unified together. And now we'd had another one last year, which is the European Sky Shield Initiative, a German-led missile defence system. We're in that. And nothing in Parliament, no debate, no votes, no. It's apolitical again.
You mentioned, though, and I spoke to you about this a while ago, and without giving away names, because I will not do that, but you speak to senior military personnel on the phone. I've spoken to probably a small percentage of the amount that you speak to, but there was a time there when senior military figures, and I'll go as far as saying general, admirals that which we know about, actually spoke up to politicians and to civil service about this, and they were told, be quiet, you're a geriatric, nobody cares about your opinion anymore.
Well, they were interestingly, we come back to this toxicity. I mean, it's probably the best way of looking at this is, right, the EU are an open book with this. It's all out in the open, all right? It's an open discussion in Europe. There's no secrecy with it at all. It's all on the table. This is what we want. This is what we want to do, okay? So von der Leyen has stated all this stuff in terms. It's all out there. Tony Blair has stated it all. It's all on video. I've gone over it loads of times. The difference is our Tory politicians and the Labour politicians and the government and the director generals in the civil service are silent on all this because they know what the British public will say if they knew what was going on, which would be a firm no. In the majority would say, no, we're not doing that. We're not going into EU defence union. We've left, right? But we're more in now than what we were before the vote to leave. Now, those particular people in the Tory party, their strategy to deal with this when they took over in 2010 was to keep it quiet, acquiesce to it, all right? Because of the defence contracts. They wanted the defence contracts, these juicy EU defence contracts, all right? They could see a lot of money going to be spent in the future. However, this is where their ineptitude is compounded by the silence and the lack of political debate in Parliament. Interesting, Andrew Bridgen did call some of this out. So he's got a pedigree already for calling big things out. So
he's been cancelled, though, isn't he? He's been cancelled.
Yeah,
he's been cancelled by his own party.
Well, yeah, there you go. I mean, writing's on the wall, isn't it? So a lot of these, these vote leave figures that we saw, like Boris, Bernard Jenkins, John Redwood, there's lots more. Mark Francois, so let's come to him. So Mark Francois, it's been put to me, all right? So it has been put to me that Mark Francois refused, and Johnny Mercer refused to deal with those old senior officers, generals, a couple of admirals, this kind of rank, because they were too old, right? They were Cold War, they served, they were there, they did it, they were actually saw, active service and were involved in these areas. And yet they refused to deal with them and work with them to go forward on dealing with this European Defence Union issue. Well, of course, they weren't too old. They just knew what they were on about, didn't they? They knew their stuff. And we're not going to work with you because the chances are, if we really get some steam up with this, the lid will come off and it will become political, and we can't have that.
Yeah.
So the issue now is just coming back to this. So the gambit now, NATO has signed up to go in with the EU. So they've part of the unification process to single point control. So is NATO as a trusted brand? They're safe, aren't they? They're fine. Great. Yep. NATO, right? But hang on a minute. Are NATO subcontracting to the EU or the EU subcontracting to NATO? Who is going to be in control?
Well, the thing is, Dave, it's a massive question. I do believe, from what I'm seeing, is that the British Army and the British Armed Forces will come under command of Brussels within probably this year. I don't think that, let's look at this from, we spoke about the fact that the old Cold War generals and admirals and air marshals are being frowned upon because they know how to handle a Russian aggression.
Yeah, right.
And what we're seeing now is that the Germans have just announced that the Leopard tanks that they're going to give Ukraine will not be ready until 2024. So that means here,
they're not going to do it. Yeah, they're not
going to do it. Is that people are going to keep that conflict going as long as they need to. So it's a shame that we are ignoring the knowledge and wealth of experience we have from our Cold War generals, because that's who we actually need right now to fix what's going on.
Yeah, the director generals in the civil service that hold the power, who are directing Ben Wallace, and it wouldn't matter whether that was defence, it could be health under Barclay. They're the ones directing the power now. And let's make sure everybody understands this is a critical Tony Blair personal project. It is essential, I quote, essential that European defence that the European Defence Union gets going and it's ready for active service. And I think von der Leyen has stated a date, 2024, not far away now, is it? So the pitch at NATO, so the press releases and the tweets that we've both put out are using wording like cooperation and partnership. All right. And that sounds lovely, doesn't it? Well, what's not to like? That's fine. Okay, yeah. We'll cooperate and we'll partner with you. We'll can't do it on our own. We'll have to, gang up.
It's an abusive marriage, though, isn't it? It's like an abusive partnership. It's like one's being told to stay at home and do as they're told.
Hold on. Whoa. No. The EU they're not cooperating, and they're not partnering with anyone. What the EU are doing is going towards unification, unify, union. It's what it's called, defence union, right? Yeah. Single point control. Goes to the council. There's no democracy involved in any of this stuff at all. They're completely undemocratic. Nobody will be able to say no.
Yeah.
Which is originally, when I first got going in 2016, what the objection was from Major General Julian Thompson. Who will say no to this? There will be no way of saying no to the EU because they will have command and control. So to pitch it, like keep it under the radar, like we're saying, we've got all this other traffic and, the window that's out there in the media at the minute with all this other stuff. Co-op and partnership. Now, that's not what they're doing. They're unifying. And that's there's a massive difference,
Dave, unless the thing is, the next election, next year's election, 2024, is going to be vitally important. And the thing is, if we keep, regardless what we think, if we keep Labour and Conservative in positions of power, then we will lose the control of the armed forces to Brussels. Because right now what's happening is we are seeing the amount of restrictions on food. We're seeing migration at its largest numbers. We're seeing all these things being restricted. We're being treated like shit by Brussels, and they will not treat us. They will not treat us like perfect human beings and actually respect us until the amount of pressure they've applied on the UK has pissed off Remainers and Brexiters for so much that we are forced to rejoin the EU, and that way they will then take off the brakes and let us have the food and the stuff we were used to getting from the EU. We are being held hostage massively, mate.
There's a lot of, it's compounded by obviously they're very good at this, and as I've said, from what I understand, and I've just spoke to a major general this morning, I spoke to a major general last week, and then an ex-air chief marshal the week before on this. Is what we have is a series of open goals as far as our ministers are concerned. And I know one that's just been briefed. And the response from the officer came back. This minister had absolutely no idea of any of this stuff. None. And for just bringing it back to, let's say from a coalface perspective, as you as a sergeant. So if you, and this is a question, so obviously this goes on, we get into unification, there's no political debate, and we're just in defence union because we've took another big slice now through NATO. We're in NATO, NATO's our cornerstone, but now we're in EU defence union through NATO. So that gambit of NATO's the cornerstone of our defence, how are they now going to get over that? Is anybody going to be prepared to say the EU is the cornerstone of our defence? Let's see if someone wants to pitch that one to the general public. But of course, that who will it? Obviously, the command is very straightforward from what I've seen from the command paper. You know, you go into any of this, the EU are in command. That's it. Full stop. End of.
Yeah.
Right. So, whose rules and regulation and lawfare and armed conflict are they going to be under? Will they be under the Geneva Convention like the Americans, or will they be under the European Convention of Human Rights? So what do you think?
Well, Dave, first of all, someone asked a question, and someone said it's not on control. We aren't under control of Brussels. We're under control of French and German. What I would like to put out there, I'll just answer this question first, is what we're trying to say is the headquarters of the European Union defence is in Brussels. So that's what we're saying. Whenever we say we're under the control of Brussels, that's where the headquarters is. What we're not saying is, so I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah,
the second thing is...
Let me try and answer that. All right.
Pardon?
So let me try and answer that, because the guy's saying to an extent is correct. However, that we're in a process of unification. All right. We're not at the ultimate threshold point, which is we go in fully and we unify with them, and however they're going to warp the pitch for that. And we've just seen really the way that they'll do it. It'll be all soft wording like co-op and partnership, nothing to see, move on. So we're in a process. We're not there yet. They don't have command and control of our military at the moment, but we are make no bones about it, we are in a process that the EU owns and controls, that the Tory defence grandees are acquiescing to a slice at a time in silence. And our director generals in the civil service are driving this from the British government perspective. Okay, so no, we're not in, but we are going in a slice at a time, and it's incremental. So, as one particular Trident admiral put to me, is that this is typical EU. This is the creeping of sovereignty, but nothing definitive. Right? But the warnings were there for such a long while. All right. So so everybody understands this. Lord Tebbit told me that Margaret Thatcher was pitched for defence union, currency union, and the removal of the national veto in 1984 at Fontainebleau by Jacques Delors. This is not a new thing. The EU wanted to go military then. That's why she said no, no, no. But the Tory party refused to engage on the military issue. She mentioned it a few times, but it went very deep and quiet. And it's been deep and quiet with Blair. So you're right about the next general election. The Tories will not debate this or take it political. Neither will Labour. So there will be no option at the general election to debate this about what we're going to do with our military and defence and security policy.
Unless?
Because there won't be a mandate not to.
Well, the thing is, but this is where the likes of, and I'll mention this regardless what people think about him, this is where the likes of Richard Tice right now should be forcing this issue out.
He will not touch it. I have
Why?
tried over and over again. Who is your defence and security policy spokesman? He won't even return an email. I've rang their call centre. I've approached their deputies. No one in that party will talk about defence and security. Now, I don't know.
The thing is, I don't see. You'll have an opinion on this, but I don't seem to be able to see anyone in our higher military echelon willing to fight for the British public. It's like they've given up, or is that because they're getting pressured?
They've not been given up. They've not given up. What they've been is nobbled. They've been nobbled by the likes of these, and I would say it's an error of judgment by Mark Francois not to work with them, and Johnny Mercer, and all the usual would-be Tory defence sort of people that that are in this subject area. All right, they've refused to engage with them, because what happens is, if you want to talk to, and let's again, he won't mind at all at being named, Richard Kemp. Okay. Let's talk about European Defence Union. He knows it top to bottom. Yeah. And he's gone, these are serious issues. This is a problem. This won't work, and he's very, very good at his job, and he's analytical. Now, of course, you put him in a room with a load of Tory.
Dave, first of all, I'm going to say thanks for saying that, because Colonel Richard Kemp is watching this live. So,
good.
Hello, sir.
Come on, because the Tory grandees don't want to discuss this. I know that for a fact. They want it kept quiet. They don't want to talk about it. We've seen this since the vote leave shenanigans. And now we're at the kind of very, very big slices of sort of, eventually we will wake up one week, next week, and they'll go, well, we're just doing this and that's it. And it's done. And it'll be, and then how the hell then will we get out? As Julian Thompson said, how will we say no?
Yeah.
So Tice is an interesting one because he did have a colleague there of Kemp's from Veterans for Britain as defence spokesperson with the Brexit Party with Nigel Farage. Now, however, they didn't announce that. It was never announced. So you had a world-class striker, shall I say, if I wanted to make a football reference, it'd probably be a rugger man. And it was never announced. So we pushed this. They still wouldn't announce that Roger was their defence spokesperson. And then they benched everyone where they stood everyone down. And I know Roger was incredibly annoyed about that.
Are you referring to Admiral Roger?
Rear Admiral Roger.
Yeah.
Okay. He's flag officer subs, Polaris Trident. This is this guy knows this stuff inside out. And they really, really treated him and a lot of other people appallingly. But it was what stood out for me at the time was that they had that guy. I'm, in conversation to me, I'm now the Brexit Party defence spokesperson. I'm thinking, great, the lid's going to come off this now because he's just, because he knows all about this issue. And they never announced it. They never gave him a platform. It's almost like they parked him and put him on the bench. Absolutely atrocious. Yeah. I have a major issue with Tice for that. And still do. And ironically, I did actually meet Tice in Parliament Square with Dennis Hutchins when we had a would-be parade / rally / protest about the Northern Ireland veterans, and he was there with Dr. David Ball. And I said, well, now you're here, are you going to do? I went over, Rusty Furman, SAS said, but Dave, go over there and bump Tice. What's he doing here? We've just spotted him. So I went over and it's like, well, now you're here, you're going to do something with this. So you're going to speak out about the veterans and get, so veterans, defence, security, it all goes together. Nothing happened. Zero. Yeah.
It's a difficult one, David, because those ones that have the ability to create changes sometimes just make sure that they don't ruffle their own feathers. They want to make sure that their pensions are secure. They don't care what's happening around them. And they want to keep veterans just in a nice little box. They want to keep us there and make sure that we don't ruffle feathers. Do you remember a while ago that me and you were pushing certain things with veterans and we had a lot of suppression from civil servants, MOD, from people in certain chains, made it difficult for us to even speak to each other because the amount of stuff that came our way was just atrocious.
Yeah. Well, if you go, I think, it's perhaps best to reference some of the more critical people that have spoken about this. So General David Petraeus, speaking at Policy Exchange in 2018 about this lawfare problem, about the I think he called it the over expansive use and interpretation of the European Convention of Human Rights that's give rise to all of this. So my understanding of the reason we've got that problem. So America fights under Geneva Convention. I mean, Petraeus articulated all of this stuff perfectly. And we're sliding more and more European Convention of Human Rights. Well, now my understanding, and I'll stand to be corrected, I'm not prejudicing this, is that the EU will fight under that, not the Geneva Convention. So the lawfare will be that side, the rules of your rules of engagement and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So what we've got is essentially, if you want to fight with the EU, it'll have to be under this legal framework, not the one that America fights under, and we've got a big problem with that. Because
I've seen that, David.
Petraeus was saying
that
this is having obviously a huge impact on the personal end of the veterans that are being pursued by using this lawfare. So that's on the personal level. And then on the strategic level, at a national strategic level, it's causing real problems because of the way that Britain would interact with America in a fighting capacity. And then he then went on to say, this is going to have a consequence. It could be very, very bad, and how we would fight together in the future. But moreover, the morale, the retention, and the activity and the recruitment of our armed forces. So it has a huge detrimental impact, because we've, rather than just, as it used to be, Geneva Convention, we've now got a conflict. How do we serve two masters, which is back to where Anne Widdecombe was with calling out Boris in 2019.
That you articulate that, I mean, perfectly. From a soldier who's been on the battlefield, working with Americans, Estonians, and different armed forces. This is why a lot of young soldiers today are reluctant to operate that trigger and engage the enemy, because whenever we land in battle and we have the Marines with us, they've got their Geneva Convention. However, I would like to point this out: the United States of America have not signed up to the full Geneva Convention. They've picked the parts that suit them, and that's what they work off, whereas we would have to use it all. But we've also, believe it or not, we work under, as you mentioned, the human rights side of it. We've got the law of the land. We've got, as well as this, the law of armed conflict.
Yes.
So we have the rules of engagement.
Yes.
So we have so many restrictions that overlap each other that it makes it difficult for us to go into battle with the US Marines to move forward. We will move forward under our card, and then there's parts of our card that say you cannot engage unless it's this. So while we're sitting back trying to get permission from headquarters, can we change the rules of engagement to card 439 Alpha? So while we're waiting permission from our headquarters, the Americans are moving forward with the battle. Okay? And they're looking back at us and going, what the fuck's the point of working with the British? They're so restricted. Yeah. And so
Petraeus called all this out. The key thing is that there was a report made post that intervention that he made, and a very useful intervention, because it it called out both the personal end and the national strategic level. So a report was made. It was on the desk for Boris as the new Prime Minister. And do you know what's happened since then?
Nothing.
The report's there. I mean, it's all there. This is a huge strategic problem nationally, and it's a catastrophe personally for the vets. So the report was there. What's happened subsequent? On Boris's desk.
I would say it's probably been 12, 13. It's been brushed aside.
And the ministers that are there. What report? Oh, crikey! Hang on. Are we really that woeful with this stuff? I mean, it's easy.
I've sat and spoke about this too, and I'll say Cold War veterans. When I say Cold War veterans, I talk about my mother and father. So I sit and chat to them about this, and from their opinion, and from yours and others, the only way that our armed forces are going to improve is if we bring back the War Office, where we have retired generals, admirals, air marshals, retired RSMs, people that actually know the stuff inside out, to work independently. Because the minute we changed and we have civil servants, university graduates that have got no experience or knowledge of what's happening out on the battlefield or what's happening out strategically, who are now telling our generals, you're over the hill, we don't want your opinion anymore. So today's civil servants have made this. They've made this issue.
They're driving this. The tasking in settings are realistically as Blair left them. Okay, so there's been this transfer, and I would submit this, that the likes of Bernard Jenkin and all of the other military strategists there on the backbench committee in Parliament, could name a few more, if they thought that they were going to unpick this and deal with it in the manner that they thought that we would go along with it on the basis of defence contracts and jobs. So there's the political side of it. On the strategic level, they were grossly off. They were grossly wrong, because von der Leyen, and we come back to this, the contrast of absolute secrecy, keeping it dark, our end in our own government, and yet the DGs are driving it. We've got the officers, the old officers that can see it and understand this, going no. All right, we've got the politicians then foolishly keeping it quiet rather than bringing it out and talking about it. But the contrast is, of course, is von der Leyen has already stated in terms what she wants and how she wants it and when she wants it. And in particular, of course, we could highlight two aspects of their strategy being completely wrong, which is that the defence contracts gambit is really foolish, because she's already stated she wants one single EU-appointed defence contractor, one company. So it would be the EU's own company, in effect. So they'll unify, let's say, for the sake of an argument, Airbus and a few others into a big conglomerate. all right, and they will have single point procurement for all their kit. Now, she said, we want our service people in EU Defence Union, wherever they are and wherever they're from, we will second people from Germany, Italy, France, and it won't matter about their language. They will be able to get in a bit of equipment or use a bit of equipment or maintain that equipment common. It will be common, but it'll be supplied by the EU. So the act of unification will take place when they issue the kit. People keep asking me this. When will we actually see, EU military, rolled out? Well, it will be when they issue the kit. So we're sort of, with NATO, this slice that we've just seen with NATO, it's another big step towards that. But we haven't got to the point yet where they're actually manufacturing and procuring. That will happen very soon, I understand. But of course, the Tory party grandees that think that BAE, Babcock and Rolls-Royce are going to get a slice of this action, well, they will for a while. They will be they will be a subcontractor. That's the key thing. They will not be the contractor. They will be the subcontractor. But then very quickly you will find the companies have to merge and unify. Now,
I've watched this.
Think of that.
I've watched sort of this fall out a little bit. There is a Conservative MP from Berwick-on-Tweed called Anne-Marie Trevelyan. You know her anyway. Yep. She was part of the MOD for a while, and her job was procurement. But what I've discovered is whenever Anne-Marie Trevelyan would speak out about, no, we need to keep some of our manufacturers in the UK. Why are we giving away MOD contracts abroad? Yeah. So whenever she started speaking out about that, though, she lost her position in the MOD for procurement. So there's a lot of things that don't sit well, and people have to. So now, whenever you get somebody in to replace that individual, and a job comes up for EU defence, and we need someone to make this, Apaches need something, which should be, and well, a lot of things made for Apache are made in Belfast and George Bombardier under an American contract. So whenever we speak out about that and go, well, why can't we make this for our own Apaches? Well, the US Apache Hellfires and different missiles are made in Belfast under US contract. Britain now UK now has its own Apaches. Can we not get our own company to make it for us? No, we have to go to America to buy our missiles for our Apaches from America and have them sent across to the UK, even though they're made in the UK. I mean, the bullshit and the go to this is just non-stop.
I want to kind of sum this up, because I'd be interested to, if Richard Kemp's still watching, his opinion, and particularly as well Tim Collins. So it's a shout out to him as well. So obviously, just sort of differentiating this sort of difference between contracting, subcontracting, whether that be industrially with the procurement, with the kit, or militarily with an operation. Obviously, the EU have already said they want command of both capital and operational budgets with this thing. Is how that will dovetail back to actually the military itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be very interested in their opinion on that.
Well, hopefully we'll get comments after this video, and I'll keep you informed of what comes from it. But I'm very, it's, you know what, I shouldn't be, but I am. I'm concerned about the direction that our politicians are taking our armed forces. It's concerning that we may lose control of our top military officers who have to toe the line.
I think the best way to look at this is that that's happened partially already. It's because it's happened. This sort of process is incremental. I think we're partially, probably way too far along that process already. And you know, we're back to a sort of point, you know, where we've sort of, from a national perspective, you know, from a national sort of sovereignty, either industrially or militarily. And I've got to say, I think this is probably the best way to sum this up. So Sir Francis Walsingham, standardizing the guns, yeah, it had a dramatic effect with the fighting going on in that period, right? It increased our efficiency dramatically, and we overcome the enemy as a result, right? So probably back to Richard Kemp with this, is that if we allow, and I'm caveating this as a question, if we allow the EU to standardise the guns, and I don't just mean guns, but all equipment, if we allow them to do that, will they have then, really the whip hand and the command and control of not just the industry, but the military? So it's a kind of, it's a sort of thing that really we invented this, if you want to say, Francis Walsingham all those years ago back in the Elizabethan era. This is a well-known lesson for us industrially and militarily in Britain. But if we allow the EU to standardise the guns and take command and control, right, once they've issued the equipment, right, because nobody knows this bit's still dark. The EU haven't released how they're going to proceed with the next stages post this NATO announcement, right? Because it's not going to stop. There will be more, and it will get bigger and better and bolder as we go along. But the biggest issue, of course, is that it's the director generals within the civil service that are pushing this. The ministers are not saying no. They are literally just rubber stamping it and going along with it. Almost as, Anne Widdecombe and I, when we've discussed this frequently, it's, well, like they're being bamboozled, David. Well, because they don't know anything. And that's ironic, because this is what this Major General told me from last week, is that he's speaking to a minister, had absolutely not a Scooby-Doo. And the civil servant sat in there with him taking notes. Like, well, how can you not know about this stuff? This is reprehensible.
They're kept in the dark. I think it's just, if you need to know, you know. If you don't, it's kept from you. What you don't know, you cannot help change. So if you don't know about it, you're not going to fight to stop it.
Yeah. I think I have real, and this is quite a long journey for you, me, and anybody else that's been on the defence union scene, Kemp and all of his fellows there at Veterans of Britain, and anybody else, is that we've continually had this, just if there was the understanding, and the politicians, Labour and Tory, obviously because Blair is, set this task the Labour Party, despite the fact their front bench are really having a bit of go at the Tories about procurement and supply chains and cuts and all this sort of stuff. The elephant in the room, of course, is defence union, because all of this, what does that matter if you go into defence union? Well, it matters not, because the EU will be doing all of that, and we will literally just be a small, a wheel within that bigger cog. This standardising the guns gambit. So they're kind of mugging everyone off, really. I can't understate that enough. So this whole vote, leave or remain, because it was denied from them as well, don't forget. They weren't pitched a vote, do you want to go into defence union? Hands up. That for those people at vote leave to continually block putting this on the agenda, we want to take back control of. Can you remember the gambit?
Yeah.
Laws and our customs and our borders. If there's any of that happened, but the big one, of course, the majority of the issue for the EU, which they wanted to achieve, was defence union. It was literally like it was, oh, crikey, and I want to talk about that. Shh, quick, do something.
It's been hidden.
Been hidden, yeah.
The migrant crisis forces everyone to look at one issue. And I'm under the impression that,
well, Rear Admiral Chris Parry's called that one out for quite a while, and I had a good, some bit of dialogue with him, and I've picked up on a lot of things. Now, apparently, when he was Director General of the Defence MOD DCDC Defence Concepts during the Blair regime, he put a paper out forecasting what was going to happen with the superpower competition and all of this displacement of the population and what would eventually be a migrant. A massive migrant problem, and if we didn't get our policies right, what was going to happen? And we are literally seeing that. Some, I don't know, whatever it is, 15 years subsequent to that. But he was literally right. Wall, stop, shut up, because Blair wanted the open door policy. All right, so you can't then go, well, no, we're going to have a closed door policy. All right, so he called it out, and he said, this the biggest problem that we've got now is we don't control our offshore zone, we don't have a safe and secure maritime border, and this is going to carry on because the policy's not there. And yet we've seen Braverman and all these other ministers dancing around with this, making yet another open goal.
But surely this migrant issue is being forced on us by the European Union and by France, who are forcing it towards the UK, and it's a bit like, oh, you want us to stop? Rejoin.
I think it's probably 50-50. It's wrong to say it's just the EU, because there are significant factions within our own government, not just the Director General.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
That are actually more or less a symbionts with that common open door policy. So you can't just say the EU are bad, actually, because the majority of our immediate problem is our own government.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't saying the EU are bad. I'm just saying that the EU, along with our politicians, are enabling this to continue until we decide to move back into where we should be. And I see that happening quite a lot. It's strange. There's so much that's annoying me about this, that it's hard to sort of sometimes come across without using foul language. I'm going to be honest, because I am angry about it.
Very interesting, because one particular Major General I spoke to this morning, we did start to swear, but let's not detract from where we are with it, which is, we're back to where we were with the public awareness, is that we are going into EU Defence Union with no vote, no debate, nothing from the politicians. The Director Generals and the Civil Service are driving it, and we're actually seeing one particular guy who was driving this from within our own government, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and then the MOD, where he was on loan, and he is now senior in NATO. It's at this point we mentioned document dumps in a bus stop in Kent. Should we bring that in?
Oh, yes, I know who you mean. Yes, that was done. That was a document dump that he did. Well, information there.
It was reported in quite a lot of mainstream press. There was some tabloid and broadsheet exposures. This was a civil servant called Angus Lapsley, who apparently left just some, secret documents at a bus stop in Kent.
There was information in those documents which gave positions and dispositions away of our UK Special Forces, where they were.
Well, there was quite a lot of significant detail in there. But anyway, so this guy now is assistant senior guy at NATO. Anyone? I think some sort of further and better would be required at this stage. Perhaps you'd like to invite him on, see if he'll come on and talk to you.
I will. Well, once we finish off in a minute, I'll have a few feelers out and see what happens. Yeah. Be interesting to find out why this isn't being discussed and why we're all being kept in the dark, Dave. But you know what? I'm going to be honest, mate. It's been a pleasure chatting to you and getting all this information. And thanks, everyone. We've had over 500 people tuning in at any one time. Interesting stuff, guys, girls. Thanks for joining us, me and Dave, today. If you've any questions, please leave in the comments below. And Dave, anything I get which confuses me, I'll pass on to you, because you're the intelligent one out of the two of us.
Don't give over. Well, I look forward to the wash up anyway. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. I'm going to shoot off now and get some things done, but I appreciate you giving me the time. Thanks, Dave, and take care. Bye.